Hashtag psychotherapy unfogged with Mark Fielding.
Hello, and welcome to Series 6, Episode 1 of Hashtag Psychotherapy Unfogged. Our regular listeners will know that this season we're going to kind of go through lots and lots of different areas. I've got lots of really interesting guests lined up, and we're not going to have a theme. The previous theme for season 6 was relationships, and we covered, many, many different areas of relationships. And I thought that was a really great series, but I just want to really, really expand in series 6. So today we have the absolute pleasure of having return guest Anna Lempriere back on the show. So it's lovely to see you again, Anna.
And you, Mark. I'm very privileged to be here.
Yeah, regular listeners will remember that Anna came on in, I think, season 2, talking about I think in a program talking about different therapies. We talked a little bit about your work. I want to kind of kick off today and ask a lot more about your work. But for listeners that are not familiar with you and haven't listened to season 2, Anna, could we start off by you just can I just ask you to tell our listeners a little bit about you?
Wow. When you get to the age of 54, it's quite a long list, isn't it?
It is. It
Uh,
is.
where would I start? Well, my name's Anna Lempriere, and I call myself the conscious coach. And I think that's a lot of the time when we were meeting before, had our podcast before, we were talking about coaching in regard to therapy and psychotherapy and all that sort of thing, and where it was birthed from
Yeah.
counselling. So yes, I'm a coach and I call myself the conscious coach because I know all coaches are conscious. Hopefully they're not coaching you asleep. But I was marrying two ideas there, which is since a really young age, the age of 7, I found yoga. And I was introduced to yoga just by, luck really at 7. I just went to a Montessori school where there was a teacher there that had been to India, came back and started teaching us yoga in the evenings. And for the first time in my life, I mean, I was only 7, but it's interesting that 7 is an important time, isn't it? It's said to be where
Yeah.
you kind of move away from the mother a little bit. That at that age, practicing and finding something that was physical in the body, because I felt like I was quite disembodied because of my childhood, because of, well, I was still in childhood, but because of my birth and everything, um, a little bit disassociated with being in a physical form. And so finding that yoga really brought me like, this, I can do something, I'm capable of something. And then it kind of came like little moments in my 20s as well, finding yoga, and also finding the book You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. And that's
Yeah.
when
Great book.
that sort of woke me up in a way to personal development and recognizing, wow, you can actually change who you are or work with who you are and find that there's a sort of expansion that can happen in your life where love can come in. And so the conscious coach aspect is I've done formal training with Barefoot Coaching, who are affiliated with Chester University. So I've done a sort of business consultancy, all
Mm.
that kind of thing, formal business coaching. But then throughout my whole life, I've been fascinated with the human condition and the
Mm.
spiritual journey, my own desire to be free of suffering, the kind of recognition actually now at 54, maybe you can't be free of suffering. Maybe you have
True.
to find a way of it being a fuel or it being a beautiful arrow to help us to see um, where more love needs to come in, um, and that it can actually be the what would you call it? Almost like the pressure cooker that actually blasts open expansion.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
so so yeah, conscious coach mixing corporate. So I've been working in corporate for 20 years.
Mm.
I would say the other day I nearly got myself a corporate role, not on a salary basis, but I'm always pitching for
Yeah.
work.
Mm.
And one big corporate, they came back to me, which happens every now and then, and they said, "Oh, you're a little bit unconventional."
Mm.
And so that I think is really interesting because it's the spirituality, the psychological, the psyche aspect, the soul aspect. That is who I am. Absolutely. Like I can't hide that. I can't pretend I'm not. And yet I've got all this corporate experience, and
Mm.
I might say I'm a little subversive over the 20 years of going in, masking in a way, being much more credible and dynamic and wearing the persona that the corporates like. Giving it away now, but this is what, and I
Yeah.
teach women as well how to do that.
Mm.
And then once in there, being that more unconventional, still being able to teach them how, women especially, how to operate really in a patriarchal structure, in a system. Um, Especially women who may well be on the spectrum or may well, be more sensitive. I've never had a label, but I would call myself a highly sensitive woman due
Yeah.
to childhood trauma, which is a gift and also can be
Mm.
very, very traumatic trying to operate in a in a
Yeah.
corporate setting, in a patriarchal
I'm
setting.
an HSP as well. So
Are you?
yeah, so I understand. Yeah, sorry, I'm interrupting you, but yeah.
No, 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 because I want to
Yeah.
I need to learn more about this
Mm.
HSP as a highly sensitive P person.
That's,
Yeah.
mm, yeah.
Yes. So yes, so what do I do is I have two strands to my work. I am a yoga teacher. I have an online yoga community, which I don't really sell.
Mm.
It's very much word of mouth. People just find me and come to my online classes. And then I do workshops every now and then in Cornwall, most of the time,
Mm.
occasionally in London,
Mm.
where I will teach Kundalini yoga, which is the
Mm.
yoga of awareness and working with our energy fields.
Mm.
And then I've created this program, Mark. See, I told you it was a long.
No, no, no. This is, yeah. I mean, I want to hear about your work. I mean, the
Good.
Speak You program.
Yes. So the
Yeah.
Speak You program has grown really from being in a corporate environment, working with an amazing woman who's a female director who'd been given a large budget to bring a women's network into a huge corporate that didn't have one. And I think they recognized, as there was all this demand really from the government to say we need more transparency. We have to see what the disparities are in these organisations
Mm.
financially and opportunity equity wise.
Yeah.
I think this particular organisation went, right, quick, let's chuck a load of money into
Mm.
creating a women's network.
Mm.
And I'd worked with her as her coach, helping her give a speech, and we had a good connection. So she said, would you like to create something to help these women who are kind of mid-level, managerial, or moving into senior roles, but might not necessarily have the confidence, saying it, if I had a quid for every time we talked about imposter syndrome, which is a big subject, but
Oh, yeah.
just feeling like not that
Mm.
they didn't deserve or they didn't have the skills. And
Mm.
so that's where being a yoga teacher, as well as I was an actor for the first half of my
Yeah.
life to the age of 30, and then the coaching, I kind of went away and thought, wow, what an opportunity. I could offer them
Mm.
a workshop, you know, or I could think of a program. And so
Mm.
that's the first time I sort of expanded and went, okay, let's take these women on a 6-month program where they look at different facets of communication. Because for me, how we communicate, how I communicate, and my journey around communicating my truth, myself, being able to speak into spaces that I didn't feel safe to,
Mm.
all of that felt like that's how you progress your career really,
Mm.
is to be a great communicator.
Yeah. True.
So I looked at all the different facets and created these online or in-person workshops, ones on confidence and presence. But inside all of those workshops was the spiritual
Mm.
aspect. So
Mm.
what is confidence? It's faith. It's a faith.
Mm.
We have to have a faith in a higher power, in love, or that there's potential. Presence was very much, okay, what's your brand identity? How are you known? But also, can you deeply listen? Um, how do people feel in your when they're with you. All of these, so we looked at lots of different aspects of that. They also got one-to-one coaching. I shared with them, I was very, very clever, tell you my secrets. But because it was a presentation skills, or is a presentation skills, or exemplary communication skills program journey, I showed them lots of TED Talks. So, and on one level, I was showing them a TED Talk to say, look at the journey this communicator takes you on. How do they open?
Yeah.
How do they pull out ideas and bring it to life and all of that? But then what I did is, on a second level, I would choose a TED Talk that was educational. So it might be a TED Talk on equity. So you're educating and waking people up as well as teaching them how to speak. So it would be, I have an amazing TED Talk that I always share by a lady called Lovey Ujjayi, who's an incredible woman who wrote a book called I'm Judging You to Do Better. And she was part of the Black Lives.
Write that down. Yeah.
I'm Judging You to Do Better.
Yeah.
Lovey Ujjayi, I hope I'm saying her name
Mm.
correctly. But she's exceptionally funny, really articulate, but also talking about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and speaking into spaces that you're the other, you're not the one, you haven't necessarily got allies around you, and how you can do it anyway. And yeah. So there we go. What I'm doing is I'm showing them how to speak. I'm showing them techniques that we can pull apart, but also at the same time, we're looking at ideas. We're looking at ideas that help these women in these corporates go, oh, and then I would then help them to find their love of what felt really important to them within their working environment that they would speak about.
Yeah, I love that.
So,
Yeah.
so really helping them to share their expertise, talk about their area of the business and what they're working on, so to blow their own trumpet, but then also what needs to be done that's not being done that could be done better. And so, I mean, I've had the privilege to work in the biggest companies in the UK and Europe, and really supported some women to make immense change in their organization. Things like single-use plastic in a huge media company that that does all the festivals and all of that, supporting a lady to give a speech which turned around them using single-use plastic.
Wow.
That's just one.
Yeah.
And so as the spiritual woman, I'm going to stop in a sec, but
okay.
as a spiritual woman, I always kind of grappled with, how I felt about going into these environments and working for Big Brother, if you like, or working for these institutions that may profit over people and all that sort of thing, and struggling with that myself, and then thinking, well, it's almost like we have to go into the 3D reality. Like, we could all transcend and just be love, 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 or I decided I needed to be able to be brave enough to go in and see if you can change the structure by going in and helping people to see differently.
Yeah, and just I mean, as I said, I think when we first met during the first interview, you bring so much experience from so many different areas to the work that you do, and the work that you do with women in organizations is, this is an understatement, but it is really multi-layered, isn't it? Yes, you go in and the focus is on, helping them to speak, to present, but goodness me, there were so many layers to the work. And my guess would be that women come out of this program, yes, much more confident in able to make presentations, but B, changed.
Oh my God.
To some extent.
Absolutely. I mean, what's weird is I don't like I've been told off by a female director for saying it like this, but I have a small business and it's very challenging. And we can talk a little bit more about this later, but it's very challenging spinning every single plate.
It is, yeah.
And also having that confidence to spin every single plate, because we ebb and flow as human beings. We're not everything all the time, or so it's really, really challenging. But to sort of, how would I say it? I'm not a big corporate business that uh, pulls in loads of money and can invest loads of money.
Mm.
And yet, when I worked at BT, I've probably worked with maybe 80 female leaders at BT. I hope I'm allowed to say their name, not
Mm.
BT.
Mm.
Um, I did a video testimonial, and there were women there that were saying, that they'd done Harvard University training and, business training and leadership at at that level. They're doing a lot, and they said that my program was the best they'd ever been on, and that it wasn't a normal course.
Mm.
And
It's
I
so
think
much more,
that's
isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's because my heart is invested in each woman. It's like each woman that I was working with, it's a very tailored, each journey is completely tailored to what's going on for them. Some women, being a woman of color, and how she was experiencing, this is just one person that's coming to mind, how she is experiencing being in that organization and her progression, and how she wanted to articulate her ideas without, finding fine tuning that. Another woman being the top saleswoman in this whole sector, going through the menopause. So she said before she would be able to walk into a room and she would be like, very, very powerful presence and, high figures in selling and all this kind of thing.
Mm.
And she said she got to the point where she couldn't answer the phone and that she would be sweating and not necessarily hot flushes, but sweating with anxiety. And we moved through it. We worked through it. And
Mm.
so these are just two people that have come into my mind. But I think because, like you, I go, it's therapeutic. We look at soul, we look at love, we look at the big picture of childhood and birth and looking ahead at death, and like, what legacy do you really want to leave and what do you genuinely
Mm.
really care about? And
Mm.
I get very feminist and very fired up, and it can be a little bit, it can feel a little bit like anti-establishment in a way, but
Mm.
sometimes I think you need that to be able to
Mm.
show up in these spaces.
Yeah. Well, I guess I mean, all women are banging up against the patriarchy constantly in organizations, outside organizations. The patriarchy is still very much present, isn't it? I mean, some might argue, gripping on for dear life, but
Yeah,
it's really present. I mean, just in terms of kind of patriarchy and women's experiences in corporations, how is it different, would you say? I mean, it's going to be different for every single woman, and
yeah.
every single person is different, of course, but just what kind of things do you see in terms of patriarchy and women leaders and what they have to put up with that perhaps male leaders don't, what they have
Yeah,
to push through?
they don't necessarily notice. Well, I also think that it's invisible.
Mm.
So, it's what's very challenging a lot of the time for patriarchy, or living in the patriarchy, is it's very difficult to pin it down.
Mm.
And that's why it's like we talk about microaggressions,
Yeah.
and how it's a micro because to somebody that doesn't experience it day in, day out, um it's nothing, it's nothing. Yet, for somebody that's living with that, it actually starts to work against on your nervous system.
Yeah, for sure.
So it can be things like, I mean, I've worked in lots now. I've probably worked in about 50 different corporates as
Mm.
a workshop, running a workshop or coaching, or
Mm.
running my programs probably in about 5
Mm.
corporates. Um, And so it depends. Like, I'll have conversations with clients that I coach who will tell me about the place that they work. And it is literally draconian. It is really still stuck in a very old way, which is, why aren't you at work? Why aren't you on time? You know,
So
um,
common. Yeah.
no understanding of intersectionality or trauma or
No.
any of that, and banter and putting people down, and things like meetings that are organized with no thought of people having children or
Yeah.
holidays, or
Yeah.
all of those sorts
Yeah.
of things. So
True.
there's that kind of extreme
Mm.
sexism and racism and that, and then more subtle.
Mm.
So still in institutions that I've worked in that are really, you'd say, inviting guest speakers who are, really at the edge of evolution, if you like, but still in the microcosm, in meetings or in the silos of where they work, it is still uh, old
Yeah.
ways.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I want to think of it being like spoken down to,
Yeah.
the masculine voice, the male voice, or those who shout the loudest or bully the hardest
Yeah.
still.
So true. Yeah.
And not understanding equity. So it took me, after the Black Lives Matter movement, and recognizing and understanding the insidious racism that I had never really thought about.
Mm.
I then worked with this woman who did a speech on equity, and I started to sort of really understand that, that we're not all starting at the same level, and that it's unconscious that
Yeah.
we're all starting at the same level, even with regards to neurodiversity, and how brains work
Definitely.
is
Yeah.
totally different, and how brains, there's a certain way in life that certain brains work well in and others don't, and even in our education system it's like that, isn't it?
Definitely. Yeah.
So you're on a back foot there as well, and
Mm.
just sort of understanding that. And somebody that really inspired me is a man called Dan, not, is it Dan Pink? I don't know if I've spoke to you about Dan Pink
Oh,
before,
I
but
think so.
he wrote a book. I mean, he's written lots of books, but I think this one came out about 8 years ago, called Drive,
Mm.
and talking about, human purpose and drive, and what motivates us and keeps us inspired and happy to be at work.
Mm.
And I hope I can remember the three, but he
Mm.
talked about how if you're in an organization, or you have a team, you need to think about purpose. So does the person feel like they have purpose and it's in alignment with what makes them happy? So if you work with someone, if you're seeing somebody's natural inclinations and gifts and talents and skills, and you help them to have more purpose, and to feel like they're bringing, they're actualizing, in a sense,
Yeah.
they're actualizing what they're good at,
Absolutely.
then that's great. And then the second one, I'm still trying to rack my brain while I'm talking to
Mm.
think of the third one, but the second one is autonomy,
Mm.
which is only just started to be thought about since COVID.
Mm.
Before COVID, most people that worked, out there in salary paid jobs had no autonomy. So it would be like micromanagement, which again then ruins somebody's freedom, if you've got children, or you've just got this other life, or work life balance, all that sort of thing. So it's the autonomy. And then and mastery is the last one. Thank God for
Yeah.
remembering that.
Yeah.
So mastery is is the ability to improve. So again, going into certain institutions where I work with women all the time that will say, there's nowhere for me to go. There's nowhere through the glass ceiling, because there is, it's a sort of, I can't remember the terminology, but there's no job for me going up. That person would have to die or would have to retire for me to move up. And I say, well, if you're in a flexible, creative, evolved place, then you can create your role. And they would nurture that and help you and see that as, well, that's an expansion for our business, because
Yeah.
that person has all the knowledge and experience of working in that environment, and they want to progress their career, and they want to expand in the area that they're really good at. And why wouldn't a business want that? So that's
Yeah.
again what I help women do a lot, is through the words, negotiate, articulate what they're good at and what they want and how they would bring value. That a lot is the work that I do, is help, go in there and fight with them for their job evolution. Or yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and as you say, why would a business not want that? That this is because, if the business is concerned with the bottom line, with how much money they make, why would they not look after their staff, focus on their staff, their strengths, build
Yeah.
them, grow them? That just seems to me completely an obvious approach in order to improving the bottom line. But unfortunately, a lot of corporations, it's probably changing a bit, I would imagine. But I mean, and also in terms of neurodivergence, I mean, just to take, kind of one example, someone with ADHD, loads and loads of strengths there, really, really good at kind of problem solving, multitasking, there's lots of energy,
Creative.
but companies that really don't embrace kind of neurodivergence, they lose the positive aspects of people. And let's face it, we're all completely different, aren't we, really? I mean,
Yeah.
you talked about masking earlier, which I thought was really, really interesting. I mean, obviously, people
Yeah.
that are neurodivergent masking, autistic people with ADHD, but women in organizations probably also mask.
Oh,
And how do they mask? I mean, again, it depends on the situation, but what do you see, Anna, in terms of women masking in corporations?
well, we don't talk about our feelings.
Yeah.
So, feelings are dangerous. Feelings are dangerous. It's murky.
Mm,
You can't pin feelings down. You can't prove feelings. So all of that is under the surface. And I
yeah.
think, we were saying about women in the patriarchy, I think society has been doing that for so
Yeah.
long.
So true. Yeah.
And we've got this with the men as well, haven't we? The suicide rates and all of that, and
Yeah.
men really struggling as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I think that is the main thing, is that women are, and look, it's it's challenging just to talk about women, but we could talk about people that lean more into their feminine. Let's say that.
Yeah, definitely.
We
Yeah.
could, couldn't we? So
Yeah, we
let's
could.
say people that are leaning more into their feminine, um, they are deeply intuitive.
Yeah,
They are
true.
they are picking up the vibes.
Mm,
So you go into a space and you can feel the atmosphere immediately.
yeah.
And the atmosphere is created by the leader or
Mm,
the most dominant personality, the most dominant
mm.
personality, um, the most aggressive personality in the
Often.
room,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, so you're going into those environments and you're highly sensitive, or you're the other, let's say, as well,
Yeah.
and that you just shut down.
Mm,
So
mm,
you shut down those feelings, you shut down your creativity, you shut down your imagination,
mm.
and you function at the level of um, whoever is in the rooms, because it's about usually highly sensitive people, or people that are leaning into their feminine, or women. We're most of the time, and look, there's always going to be lots of, mix of differences in there, but you're
Yeah.
always going to want to be creating harmony and peace.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah.
So to keep the peace, you just shut up.
Mm, yeah.
So then, there could be so much happening in that space that might not even be getting the job done. And what seems like, oh, you've got this one that's like, we've got to do this, we've got our targets, we go, la, 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 la.
Mm,
And that's where we've got to go. And then
yeah.
all the other stuff they call soft skills,
Mm,
yes, it's all very good and we'll tick the box, but
mm,
is it really
mm.
important? So yet, if we can really feel seen and heard, and those nuances, it's very much like being in a relationship, isn't it? It's like,
Mm,
I notice with myself, when I hold something in, there's a resentment. It can feel it's held in because it feels like it's
definitely.
petty, really, or,
Mm,
thinking. But when I actually speak it, all this energy is freed up.
yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So much energy
Yeah.
comes, doesn't
Yeah.
there, from the unconscious? It's like, oh, it's out now, and now
Mm,
I'm not having to keep this in and press
mm,
it down.
mm,
And that's the same in team in a yeah. So I think that's the masking is pretending everything's okay.
Mm. Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, pretending everything's okay. And you know, that's a lot of the time I think why big organizations have such a turnover of people, and also why they deliberately turn over people, like redundancy and moving things through
yeah,
is
yeah.
the attempt to find success and harmony. And it's like, but it's a
Mm.
little bit like being again in a relationship and dumping somebody or divorcing somebody and thinking move on to the next one, that's going to work,
Yeah,
rather than what is the actual thing is people need to feel seen and heard, and people need to feel
yeah.
safe and actually
Mm.
seen and loved and encouraged, and
Mm.
like we've got the purpose, the
Mm.
mastery, and the freedom, the freedom, the autonomy is really important. It's the trust.
Mm.
So it's
Yeah.
trusting that, look, I mean, this is very big in entrepreneurial mindset that I am only just understanding. But in olden days, you be paid for your hours. You're
Mm.
paid for 40 hours a week or 38 hours a week or whatever. And the clock is being, you're clocking in and clocking out on your 40 hours, and then you get the job done. Whereas this mindset of, it doesn't matter how long it takes you, it's the quality and the result that matters. If you can do it in 10 hours,
Mm.
it's
Mm.
what is it to do with time? It's much to
Mm.
do with quality.
Mm. Mm.
So yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of, yeah, I guess the feminine energy, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right what you say. It doesn't have to be gender specific, but I guess with the feminine energy, intuition, feeling. I mean, looking at it through a kind of Jungian model, I mean, I guess the way the West has been, certainly it's thinking, it's sensation, it's what you can see, what you can touch. It's logic and rationality. Great, I mean, they're two very
Needed.
important functions, but what about intuition? What about feeling? And a lot of people do bring that to the table. And I think even the fact that these are called soft skills, I think devalues them, honestly. I
Mm.
mean, someone that's a highly sensitive person, there's lots of reasons why people are HSPs, but I mean, what do they bring to the table? They bring creativity, they bring the ability to understand people, So an HSP can walk into a room and they can read the room, can't they? They can see if
Yeah.
someone's suffering. All of those things
Yes.
are so important. I
Yes.
mean, they're gifts, really, but
They
I
are
guess for
total
for
gifts.
you know for a highly sensitive person living in the kind of society we live in now, there is a lot of propensity to get overwhelmed and misunderstood and mask and what have you. I mean, you mentioned kind of menopause. I mean, let's just talk about that a little bit. I mean, what do you see in corporations in terms of how corporations support women going through pregnancy, going through menopause? I mean, every organization is different, but what do you see any trends around how women are supported through these kind of life stages?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it depends from organization to
Yeah,
organization.
sure.
I do think now with Davina McCall and a lot of um, there's been a huge wave and huge consciousness around
It has.
menopause, and there is, in the networks, and it's definitely being invested in for
Mm.
women
Yeah,
um, in at work, as well as
right.
maternity leave and coming back to work and all of that.
Mm.
You will go into most organizations and they will have their um, training and support
Yeah,
happening. So
right.
I do definitely
That's
think
good.
in the last few years, it's growing. It's
Mm.
growing. Um, Yeah, and I also think there's something spiritual that is happening that maybe needs to be spoken of and
Mm.
recognized. And I
Mm.
don't fully know whether this is happening or not. And I can just share it from a personal
Mm.
perspective.
Yeah.
So when I went through the menopause, so I'm through now, I think maybe 2 years. It's really interesting because it happened and it was almost like, and I've heard this from other women as well, sometimes a harsh event brings on the menopause. It can. It's almost, it's a weird thing, but it can. So losing someone, it can it's almost like it all happens at once.
Yeah, well, because we're holistic organisms, aren't we? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So for me, I had a big contract, a corporate contract that was really, really sort of supporting me. That came to an end. So that, we take things personally, don't we? It's like, what did I do wrong or something like that? So that happened at the same time. My dad, my adopted dad, who brought me up my whole life, he died. And then the menopause was happening. And so what happened to me is, from a spiritual perspective, what it felt like was death, an ego death. And I'm not saying I'm ego free now, but something literally died, and it was excruciatingly painful. St. John of the Cross called it the dark night of the soul, and I love this subject. But this feeling of all the structures of my identity, who I thought I was, I'm the conscious coach. I've got an element of a level of success. I earn a certain amount of money so I can have a lifestyle that I want. I can provide, blah, 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 all of that, as well as the way that I looked was changing, and my financial stability was gone. Everything felt like, all the scaffolding is how I saw it. It's like you've got these identity scaffolds that create a structure inside of us which is healthy. Just,
Definitely.
this is who I am, and it all just completely collapsed at this time. And if you sort of think, the irony is I'm a confidence coach, really helping women to be feel more
Sure.
confidence within themselves to achieve what they want to achieve. I had nothing. I had nothing. Everything felt like a fraud. Everything felt like it was just flaky and just blowing in the wind, sort of nothing. And then the disconcertion, if that's such a word, feeling so disconcerted that for most of us, we might go through a time of depression. I don't know, but you look into the future and you sort of you've still got a future in some way. It might be tainted, but you've still got a future. And I just felt like I had no future at all. And that's where the dark night of the soul comes in, is that the darkness is there is no faith. There is no, and whatever our faith might be, there is no libido to continue. It's gone.
Yeah.
And then it was just like torture, Mark. I mean, I can remember sort of right in the middle of it. My husband sort of was really worried about me. He was amazingly supportive. And a friend of his, sort of mutual friend of ours, more a friend of his, had this barbecue, and she's a coach. So Wayne was like, let's go, thinking always a bit of networking, and you've got not much work at the moment, so this will do you the world of good to meet people. And I went. I was like, okay, no, I got myself a bit smartened up, and we were sitting around this fire and lots of people schmoozing, and they were kind of businessy people and things like that. And already I just felt like I have no words. And that's what's weird, is when you're a speak you communications person. And because there's no identity, there's no words to express the identity or stories or anything. And it was just like nothing. And then I sat next to this woman. We were chatting, and she was talking to me about all she'd done. She said to me at one point, oh, I've got this podcast that I run, and it's a global podcast, and we've got something like 300,000 listeners. And it was literally like she'd got a knife and just stabbed it in my heart. It was just agony for me to feel like, you've got nothing. You're at this age and you've accomplished nothing, and you're just worthless, and there's no future for you at all. And that was my sort of in the depths of menopause. And why I speak about this is the dark night. You can see this time as a loss of faith. And yet, on reflection, I don't know what you think about this, but it's almost like the ego went.
Yeah.
And that there's something happening underneath. That's in the unconscious that's not yet birthed. And so it's like a snake shedding, or that image of the imaginal cells of a butterfly, where the caterpillar hasn't even got all the genetics to make a butterfly. It just turns into mush.
mm,
Um, and
mm,
that's what I felt like. But then you've got some part of your brain or your ego saying, this isn't
mm,
this isn't good.
mm.
You've got no business now because you can't speak.
Yeah, yeah, it must have been terrifying. But just to kind of come in, yeah, I mean, I really, really resonate with what you're saying. I mean, like Jung, I'm minded of kind of Jung's theory of depression. I'm probably not going to do it justice here, but just in a quite a reductive way, what he said about depression was his idea was people become depressed because their ways of working, their ways of being in the external world stop working. So maybe someone is, engaging with the external world just purely by logic and rationality, it stops working. So he felt that depression was going back inside and then the unconscious creating a different way of being in the world. And then when the person kind of emerges out of a period of depression, it's almost like the butterfly emerging kind of out of the what's it called?
Soup.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
basically, a new
yeah.
person emerges. So
It's primal soup.
it's growth. Yeah, it's even though terrifying to lose personal identity, to lose ego, to not understand who we are anymore. That there is, I think, a lot of growth inherent in that. And I think this is what you're saying, even though it must have been terrifying, really. You felt like you lost everything, really.
Well, it's terrifying because you don't know if you're going to come out of it. And I think
No,
there are women going through
yeah,
menopause that don't come out of it. And
yeah,
also that, yeah, I mean, this is going to be controversial, but also putting the patches on. And we might need to put the patches on the HRT and all of that. We might need
yeah,
to. And I have massive respect to anybody, whatever choice they make is, and also somehow it's an opportunity, it's a time in our lives, it's an opportunity, it has the potential to make us address. And why that addressing for me, it it wasn't sort of like stuck on out of nowhere. It didn't, it's like I could look at these themes are themes that I came in with,
yeah,
that I was born with. I
yeah,
came, I was, my beginnings. I brought them in. This is my story, and it's like, it's almost like an earth-shattering moment in life where you get to shake it really up.
yeah.
And sometimes the bigger the shake, maybe the bigger the trauma that happened, or
Yeah,
maybe
true.
the sort of recognition of, you've got all this potential. You can have a different life.
Yeah, yeah.
um yeah, it's these moments,
Mm,
and wanting just to treat menopause medically,
mm,
or just with exercise, or just not
yeah.
just but with these more physical physiological processes
Mm,
is one really important aspect.
mm,
And also I think
mm,
if you get the chance as a woman to go,
mm,
this is a rite of passage for me.
mm.
It feels absolutely agonizing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
there's, I don't know, that's the whole purpose of a rite of passage, is you don't know what, where the threshold
No,
that you're stepping into is going to be,
yeah.
but you have to go through it. And I think you may have heard of the story of Inanna
Mm,
and
mm,
Ereshkigal. It's the oldest female myth. So it was written on the oldest recorded written myth. It was written on these Sumerian tablets around this goddess who's the queen of heaven and earth, Inanna, and how the first sort of part of the book is she is courting this man. He's courting her, and it's just the sacred feminine and masculine getting it on, basically, and
yeah,
it's very poetic and beautiful. And once
yeah,
she's married him, she goes into the underworld to visit her sister Ereshkigal, and she goes into this underworld, but she's not really welcome there. But her sister, out of rage and hate, and not hate, but out of like fury, is like, well, all right, bring her in. And she has to go through these 7 gates, and as she gets through each gate, she becomes more and more naked and disintegrated until she's literally in the center of the underworld with nothing on. And then her sister orders her servants to beat her and kill her and hang her on a hook. And that's where the term "let me off the hook" comes from.
Oh, I did not know that.
So
Yeah.
you're on this hook and you're this
Mm,
rotting corpse, and you're just, and then of course her best friend, her um, calls on all the gods and gets this one particular god, Anki, to help her, and he sends these flies, these androgynous flies down, and to make a kind of pact or a plea to the sister that they can have her body, and she comes back and she's then reborn. And it's a bit like this Persephone and was it Persephone? There's another story later on, a
mm,
myth.
mm.
Once for half of the year she sends her husband down into the underworld, so you could say the husband is being the masculine. She sends the patriarchy down into the underworld, and so we can see that as a personal thing through the period of a cycle where, you know, we're continually processing and rebirthing ourselves each month. You could see that as a season or a cycle of a
Yeah.
life of you could see that in society, that what's going on culturally at the moment is, you know, patriarchy might need to go into the underworld and find some way of rebirthing itself.
Mm.
And it's not, you know, and that's the thing, is I think this is my final thing before I'll hand it back
Yeah,
to you, is
it's okay.
some people might think that feminism and, you know, let's, excuse me, I'm going to swear, fuck the patriarchy and
Okay.
all of that kind of thing,
Mm,
but it's, and that we want to go back to feminism or a matriarchy, and yet the
mm.
matriarchy, from the amount of research that I've done, isn't that women then were dominant. It was then we had more harmony, so
Yeah.
that there was an honoring of, look, you can be creative and sensitive and have, you know, you be the one that notices the person that's suffering and find a way with your emotional intelligence to help them feel
Mm,
loved and seen and actualized.
mm,
And there also needs to be, well, we can talk about this and we can feel about this, and now let's create it. So we definitely need
mm.
both.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, it is the integration, really, of the two. And I could talk to you for hours. Goodness knows, we've not touched on half the things I wanted to talk to you about, but I think we've done quite well. We've covered
We
it
done
quite a
really
few areas.
well.
Before we finish, is there anything you would like to say to our listeners that I've not given you the opportunity to?
Well, I would say, I mean, I'm sure you would say this as well, but I would say if you are going through the menopause, you know, be very, very gentle on yourself, and there is sort of help out there. And also, if you felt a call to work with me, especially if you're a woman and you are going at a crossroads in your life and you are feeling how I was describing, I feel now I've come through it, and I'm definitely helping women through this rite of passage, holding their hand, spiritually accompanying
Yeah.
them. Or maybe you're in a organization where you feel like, I want to be more seen and progress, and you might need help
Mm,
there, then
yeah.
you can reach out to me. I suspect all
Mm.
my contact details will be in your show notes. And
They will be. Yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing the work you do. I mean, I have to say, goodness me, it really is. I just think it's fantastic. To
thank
speak to
you.
you, all of the work you do. I mean, I'm always so inspired when you talk about, when we talk about your work and your life. You're a very, very inspirational person. I mean, we will put everything, all of your links with the show notes. But if people want to get hold of you, what's the easiest way they can get hold of you, Anna?
Probably through, you know, you've got my website, which is Speak You Method.
Yeah,
Or you can find me, Anna Lempriere, on Instagram. It's just, you know, text, not text, you know, DM me
yeah.
on either of those, and I'm really good at responding.
Yeah, fantastic. And as I say, we'll have all of your links on our show notes. And I just want to say it's been such a pleasure to talk to you
Oh,
again,
thank
Anna, and
you,
thank you
Mark.
for agreeing to come on again.
Bless you.
And I'd once again like to thank Anna again for coming on the show. Another great show, covered so many areas. I mean, as I said this time and last time during the last interview, Anna brings so much to the table that it would be absolutely impossible, to cover everything that she brings. So much experience, so much knowledge, so much wisdom. but hopefully our listeners would agree. We did cover quite a few really, really important areas. I'm always really, really inspired when I talk to Anna, and I think the work she does, empowering women in corporations through her Speak You program, her coaching, I just think is really, really inspiring. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Talked a bit about menopause today. I'm glad we've covered menopause a little today because it's such an important area and one that we've not covered during any of the shows so far. And I think this will be an area that we come back to, certainly during series 6 and have another look at it. I started the show. I normally read a bit about our guest. I didn't actually do that today. Obviously, I've still got my Christmas brain on, but just having a look, at Anna's website now. I mean, Anna has worked with, goodness me, some enormous corporations. I mean, just to name a few, she's worked with female leaders in such organizations as EE, Global Media, B Sky B, Barbican, Amazon, Apple, and the list goes on, empowering women through her, her personalized coaching and also her Speak You program. I mean, Joy on her website, she also writes, she is a fierce feminist, womanist, and it brings heart into corporate environments. She spent over 30 years exploring philosophy, psychology, Jungian therapy, personal development, and embodiment. Warm, building trust, thoughtful, brimming with kindness, expert, wise with tough pragmatism. I mean, that really fits Anna, I think. Creative, lateral, therapeutic, understanding the psychology of the human condition, a powerhouse when it comes to growing a network, building platforms for visibility and opportunity. If anyone would like to get hold of Anna for anything that any of the things she does, the Speak You program, any of the personal coaching, the yoga, please do get in touch with her. You can find all of Anna's links along with the show notes up with the show. So do check it out. And please do get in touch with Anna if she can help in any of the areas which she described. First episode of series 6 today. I'm absolutely stunned. We're on series 6. Had a bit of a break over Christmas, but I'm really, really looking forward to getting into series 6. As I said in the intro, we're not going to have a theme. We had the theme of relationships during the last series, which was great. And about time I covered relationships, being that I'm actually a relationship counsellor, so that was good. But we covered all kinds of relationships, didn't we, in series 5. Series 6, I'm going to be, my intention is to be even more expansive. I want to look at lots and lots of different areas. Maybe have some more lived experience guests on. Joe and I were talking the other day, and Joe's feeling was we've kind of had more professionals on than lived experience guests. So I kind of agreed with him. So let's put that right. I also want to do more shows on neurodivergence, ADHD, autism, all sorts of different neurodivergence. So stay tuned. This should be a really, really good series. I've already got the second interview lined up. I won't say much about it, but I'll be interviewing a professional from Hong Kong who's going to be talking about the work she does with young people and mental health. Should be a fascinating one. So stay tuned for that one. And thanks for tuning in. Happy New Year. And as always, look after yourselves, look after each other, and look after the planet. I'll see you soon on the next episode. Take care.